Hey listeners, Mallory Willsea here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. I get the privilege of working alongside all of our creators at Enrollify, but I wanted to take just a quick moment to tell you about why I love the Talking Tactics podcast hosted by Diana Kibbolds. Every other Tuesday, Day drops a new episode where she focuses on a single tactic that moved the needle on any enrollment metric, from inquiries and booth visitors to apps completed and deposits, even registrations, you name it. The catch? The tactic had to be done with limited resources, either by a single person or a small but mighty team, or limited time, or maybe without a lot of money. The podcast format is fun and engaging, and it's just different from the more traditional 60-minute interview style shows. If you work in enrollment management or marketing, be sure to give Day's show a listen. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Talking Tactics wherever you get your podcasts.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Learning from Leaders, a special 5-part Pulse Check series on leadership and management brought to you by Enrollify and Element 451. I'm Dr. Carrie Phillips, Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at UA Little Rock. My goal is to help aspiring leaders step into their next role with confidence. So, over the next 5 weeks, you'll hear candid conversations with successful higher education leaders who share their personal journeys, lessons learned, and practical advice on a variety of topics, ranging from managing teams and overseeing budgets to setting vision and building campus collaboration. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Learning from Leaders, the podcast series that's crafted for the next wave of up-and-coming marketing professionals. I'm Carrie Phillips, and the Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at UA Little Rock. And like many of you, I began my higher education career in an entry-level role and have worked really hard to advance into more senior positions. It's because of great leaders and mentors that I've developed the skills needed to be successful. And today, I get to start paying that forward. In each podcast episode, we'll delve into key competencies, experiences, and insights that are necessary to land a CMO role and to serve with confidence. Today, I am thrilled to have a friend of mine, but also a great marketing leader, Jenny Petty, the Vice President of Marketing, Communications, Experience, and Engagement at the University of Montana. I'm thrilled that she's joining us to share her journey and wisdom. Welcome, Jenny.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. I'm so excited to be here.
I have to ask, did I get the title right? Because that's a mouthful, but
it is a
amazing work.
mouthful that in a lot of ways I did to myself, but yes, you got it right. I'm also the Chief Marketing Communications Officer, but that just seems excessive. So
I love it. Well, we have so much to talk about, and I just want to jump right into the conversation. So first off, every leader has a really unique approach to managing their team. Can you share with us your leadership style and how it adapts depending on your team?
I think when you find yourself in a senior leadership role, you kind of are always doing this balance. I kind of see the managing as more of the tactical, get it done. What's our goals? What's our purpose? And then I see the leading as really addressing the whole person. And so that comes from a philosophy called servant leadership, which took me a long time to discover. I think it's a terminology that's overused a lot, but it's what I actually did my master's studies in, was organizational leadership with a concentration in servant leadership. And so that philosophy really guides the way that I think about leadership, which is based on the writings of Robert Greenleaf, which people can go and find his books. And he's probably one of my favorites. But he talks about, what does it mean to be a servant leader? And it means we're helping people to become more autonomous, more free, more independent. And so that's really what guides the way that I look at leading teams is, it's not just, are we getting our goals accomplished together as a team? It's like, am I helping these people to also develop? And so there's these 10 key characteristics of servant leadership that really help guide me. And they're things like empathy and foresight. So that's really what drives the way I approach leading people.
And I think you hit on something there, though. It's really a balance. It's that management piece, but also that that leadership piece and kind of knowing when is the right moment to go back and forth between those two. As somebody who's a new leader, an up and coming leader, what advice or strategies can you give to them as they're trying to kind of navigate that?
When I was a new leader, especially a new people leader, I had this tendency to really just get so far down in the weeds and not delegate and take on a lot of responsibility. And I think, partially it came from this sense of wanting to help and do right by people, but it also came from some insecurity. And I think, the first time I hired someone who was so much smarter than me, I was so intimidated. And then pretty quickly you're like, oh my gosh, no, this is actually amazing. This person is going to take on some of the burden of things that I'm worrying about, and they're going to be able to do it. And so, I think for those new leaders, it's having a growth mindset. It's understanding that, part of your job as a leader is not really to do so much of the work anymore. And that can be really hard, I think, especially in marketing communications, because so many of us love the product and we love the output. And you and I are very similar. We came up through the ranks of being content producers. And so that love of doing that work, you always have to find a way to stay connected to it, but you do have to let go. And sometimes that can be really hard.
Oh, that feels very similar. So, as we're talking about that, a big part of what's important for those new up and coming leaders is how to build trust with a team. Talk to me about how you manage that, how you've maybe had to gain trust to have some real breakthroughs with your teams.
I think the University of Montana team is such a good example of building trust, coming into an institution that had suffered, some pretty traumatic public relations things. And that trauma was kind of embedded in the culture. And so, when I started here, there was a culture of kind of consultants popping in and out. There hadn't been super steady leadership in this role. And so the team had kind of a lot of residual scars from that. And it took time. It took being as transparent as I possibly could. It took time for them to get to know me. I fed them whenever I could. And I think that's all you can really do is try to be honest and transparent and give good leadership and guidance. But it takes time to build trust with people, and there's no shortcuts. Like, you have to build relationships. You have to understand the team dynamics. Of course, when you start in the leadership role, people have angles that they're working, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But there will be people who want you to know certain things, and it takes some time to have some discernment around, what is this information really telling me? Do I trust the information? You have to build a brain trust within your own leadership team. So you've got to have people who are willing to tell you the truth, who are willing to push back on you, but that takes time to build trust too. And you also have to cultivate an environment where it's okay for people to do that in a way that's healthy. So there's no shortcuts, but I think just giving time and energy and showing up authentically helps a lot.
The opposite of that is it takes time to build trust, but it's very easy and very quick to lose trust with teams, with departments, with groups on campus. And so I know you've poured a ton of energy into building trust. How, when things are challenging, do you work to maintain that?
Gosh, I think for me, one of the ways that I build trust is not always the most comfortable thing in the world, but it's to be really direct in conflict. So it's to address things head on. It's to talk to people, either whether it's a challenging situation or it's challenging behavior. It's to really show up as a coach in moments like that. And also across campus. Like, there's this great passage that I have actually written on a piece of paper behind me from a Parker Palmer book. I think it's from Courage to Teach. And it's about how knowledge is actually created through conflict. And when we face conflict through an eye of competition, we don't let knowledge be created. And so I kind of think about building trust and be cognizant of not wanting to lose trust as through that lens of like, okay, we're not agreeing on something, or there's a problem here. Like, let's get to the other side of it.
I had a mentor that always told me to honor the struggle and just sit with those moments, and it sounds to me very similar to kind of what you're saying, of that there's value in that process that you go through.
There is, and I think there's tremendous hurt that can happen when you're not willing to honor the struggle. When you sweep things under the rug or you're not willing to address it, I think that's when we start to see real dysfunctions of a team happen. I want people to feel safe enough. I want to feel safe enough in
Yeah.
an organization to be able to say the hard things out loud and to be able to challenge and be challenged. And yeah, that comes with, it's not easy or fun. It comes with anxiety and worry um but I would rather show up that way than any other way.
So, shifting gears a little bit, as we talk about schedule, I imagine that your world, based on my own experiences, is very scheduled, that, every minute of every day is pretty well accounted for. But one of the meetings that I really like to keep on my calendar are those one on one conversations with those folks on my team who report directly to me. If a new leader is kind of thinking, maybe I should really start engaging in one-on-one conversations, what are the key things that meeting should look like from your perspective?
So I think one-on-ones are really one of those sacred times that I really try as hard as I can not to have to move or reschedule. I really want the people who report to me to lead those meetings. I want them to come to me with, roadblocks that they're facing, recent successes that they've had, where they need my help, where they need guidance or support. I don't really typically use those times to assign work. It's more of us for us to have a conversation and keep in touch with each other. Um, I in my past I've had a lot of leaders who would cancel those or who wouldn't show up or sometimes I didn't even have them at all. And so it's really important to me that we have those one-on-ones. They don't have to be weekly. We do ours here every other week. It's a half an hour, so it's a quick touch base. And then I'm also fairly available to them as they need. But that's a really sacred meeting.
And talk some a little bit in terms of other meetings. Talk about the staff meeting because that's one of those things that can be
Yeah.
so many different things. How do you make it productive for your team?
So you know what I'm learning, because now this is 3 years at Montana, and what I'm learning is that as our team has grown and matured, our meeting cadence and structure also needs to change. So we're kind of going through some of those growing pains right now. We have what we call our core staff meeting every other week, and that's like our central team. And that really is used for the directors to update on projects. It's for me to share what I'm learning in the shared governance meetings or reminders like from human resources or things like that, hiring updates, stuff like that. And then we have on the opposite week, we have what we call the auxiliary staff meeting. And that's where everyone on campus who has some sort of Marcom affiliation or role is welcome to come to that meeting. And with the way we've structured that is we typically have like a guest speaker come in, and it's someone whose work we need to be aware of or a major initiative across the organization that I want people to be aware of, or in really big cases for us with work we're doing, it's a chance for us to showcase the work that we're doing that everyone needs to be aware of or they need to plug in some way. The staff meetings can be really challenging. Sometimes you read the energy of a room and you're like, oh, these people don't want to be here today. And I get it. I'm tired of going to meetings I don't want to go to either. And so we're really trying to think about, okay, what's going to make this the most useful? The meeting cadence has changed so much. We've got a much larger team now. The directors of those teams are engaging each other and their teams in different ways. So it's, I think, being open to change and adapting.
I love that. I read something that you should go through all of your processes at least once a year to review your process to see if it still aligns with how you work. And it sounds like you're exactly kind of figuring that messy middle out.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news. I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times best-selling author Jeff Salingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
I love the idea of doing it once a year because process improvement, continuous improvement in Marcom shops is always going to be something that we're looking at. We're always going to be reviewing. We do it so well when we're thinking about our consumer work. We're looking at data, we're looking at trends, we're adjusting, but internally it can be harder to take the time to make that focus.
So, thinking about stepping into a leadership role for the very first time, it comes with challenges. Sometimes those are within your internal teams who they may consciously or unconsciously test boundaries, kind of see how a new leader works. These tests can really be anything from questioning a decision to seeking clarity on leadership style. Talk a little bit for new leaders of how to address these things very quickly but still be able to build trust and be able to gain support from the team.
Well, I think, you kind of nailed it in being aware that those behaviors are going to show up. When I did my master's, a lot of what we studied was really from family systems. And so a lot of the same behavior we see on teams is exactly what you'll see in a family
Ooh.
system. And so, for instance, who do you think the most powerful person in a family is?
Ooh, I'm going to go with one of the parents.
So it's actually the youngest.
What? Okay,
Because
talk me through this.
yeah, because who dictates the schedule? Who dictates bedtime? Who dictates what's on the
Okay,
TV? Who
I can
dictates
see
how
this.
right? So I think the same thing happens in teams. I think the youngest member or the newest member of a team actually kind of holds a lot of power because the rest of the group is trying to figure out how they work with this person. How do they fit in? They might feel a little insecure that
Okay.
this new person is coming into the system. So I think being aware of and educating yourself as much as you can about, what are some of those behaviors that happen with a new leader? Of course, people are going to test boundaries. They're going to see, oh, can I get away with never coming into the office? Or can I wear yoga pants? Or, there's just all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff that people will try. And I think it's very important from the beginning to set some clear expectations and also clear boundaries. I think when I first came on board, like I said here, this team had been through a lot and I probably made myself too available. And so that's a lesson that I learned. But at the same time, I was really trying to rapidly build trust. And it seemed necessary to be that available. And now I've kind of had to backpedal a little bit.
So, what advice would you have to a new leader who's coming in, their first 30 days? Maybe it's their first CMO role. So, they're naturally going to be nervous. They're leading a new team for the first time. What are 2 or 3 things they should be thinking about to set them up for success?
I think the first thing is how they're going to take care of themselves. Because if you are unhealthy or unhappy, you really don't have the capacity to do your best job. It's putting things in place. Like you were saying, our schedules are crazy. And sometimes it's like they're scheduled out, every half an hour. I mean, when I first started, my calendar, really for the first probably 2 years, my calendar was just unreasonable. And so it's like, I think taking care of yourself, drinking enough water, getting some movement every day, making sure you have ways to kind of process the stress cycle that happens. I have an executive coach who talks to me a lot about how you have to end the stress cycle. So whether that's through exercise or dance or something, you have to get that out of your body. 2, I think, is asking for help. I wish I had done that more when I started as a brand new executive. I wish I had gotten an executive coach right away because you're kind of in this weird situation where all of a sudden you're in charge. And so you're trying to figure out, what does that mean? Like, how much money can I spend without getting in trouble? Like, there's just all these things that you're trying to figure out. And I definitely could have used more mentorship, I think, in the beginning. And then I think, your first year as a leader, a good friend of mine gave me some really good advice before I took this job. She had gone into her first executive job and she said, Jenny, you will have the most power you have ever had in your first year in that job. So get as much done as you can. And so I did. I went in really swinging really hard in that first year to get the staffing we needed to get some of the big projects we needed to get across the finish line. And it was exhausting and it was so much work, but I'm so grateful that I did because I think she was right. I think you're not the new shiny person anymore eventually,
Right.
right? So
I've heard you talk a good bit about this importance of balancing self and balancing the self of your team. Talk some about, from your perspective, why that sometimes isn't the focus as much as it should be.
it's just like any relationship, right? Like if you're neglecting yourself, you're neglecting your health, it affects the relationship. Like it would be the same in marriage or parenthood or friendship, right? Like you can't show up for other people if you're not showing up for yourself. I have this propensity to put other people first. And I'm not saying that as like, oh my gosh, I'm so like saintly. That's not it. I mean, it's just the way I am. And so it's really hard sometimes. I will let myself, I used to work myself until I'd get sick, like super, super sick. And I have to kind of put more guardrails around that now. As I've gotten older and more experienced, I will take sick days. I used to never take a sick day. Like I will plan days off. So my husband and I, we've got 3 young kids. So date night can kind of be hard sometimes. So sometimes we'll plan a day in the middle of the week where we have the day together. So it's thinking about being more proactive about taking care of yourself so that you can keep showing up for the team, because the energy that is needed to show up for other people can be great. It can also be really draining.
And I'm curious, as you set that kind of example where you'll take time off or spend time with your family, how does that liberate your team to feel like they can do the same?
I've gotten some really great feedback, especially from some of the other people who are parents on the team, about how meaningful it has been that I leave for track meets, I leave for soccer practice. Like, I think it has actually set an example to them that it's okay. And then I think, I mean, even for people who don't have children, like, I want them to take care of themselves. I want them to take time off when they need it. I want them to feel like, if you have that tingling where you're like, gosh, I'm feeling really burnt out, you're probably already burnt out. We did a kind of a value exercise as a team, and we got all these wonderful values, like plant trees you'll never see, serve first, display urgency and a willingness to adapt. There's a whole bunch of them, but the final one is, it's marketing, no one is going to die. And so reminding ourselves that we are not trauma surgeons in an ER. Like it's just, and especially, this time of year on campuses, people start ramping up for that last 8 weeks or
Yes.
so. And the requests come in like crazy. And then all of a sudden people are trying to get stuff done before either they go out on contract or they're gone for the summer, and it gets really overwhelming. And so I think keeping that perspective can be really hard, but it's necessary to keep a team healthy.
And as a leader, how do you make sure your team's seeing that perspective and kind of having that mentality? How do you make sure they're thinking of that?
I think it's a lot of one-on-one conversations and check-ins. Sometimes I'll notice behavior where people seem more agitated, or they're pushing back on things that are really like more normal, where you're just
Yeah.
kind of like, I don't understand. In my mind, this is not a big deal, but sometimes people need to be told this is not a big deal. Or sometimes people need to be told, you're not going to mess this up. Like you've got this, you know how to do this. And so I think reiterating that what we do is incredibly important, and it's such beautiful work, and I'm so happy to be in higher ed marketing. But we do not have people in a surgery theater. Like there is time. We can be choosy about where we put our energy sometimes.
I love that. Be choosy about where we put our energy. I think we could all learn that lesson probably better than we do it today. And so, as we're kind of wrapping up our conversation, I want to hear if you have any thoughts, advice, wisdom for new and upcoming leaders as they think about their own leadership.
If you feel the pull to be a leader, I think you want to check your motivation to see where that's coming from. Some people just feel a natural desire to lead others, and that's great. I think some people see it as a challenge that they want to take on. I think other people are motivated by a bigger salary. And so you've got to be really cognizant of, am I going after this because of money? Am I going after this because of status? Or is this something I genuinely want to do? Because especially in higher ed marketing, these are big, demanding jobs. And you want to make sure that your motivations are right. And then I think, you really want to examine your values. So you get into a position as a leader where you're very clear on what's important to you. When I was in grad school, one of the final projects they had us do was write a leadership philosophy. And that really, for me, brought things into like sharp focus. It's actually still on. I built a website for my grad program at servantmarketer.co. If you want to read it, it's still out there. But it's just getting that sharpness around what matters to me, what matters and how I show up as a leader. What do I believe about leadership? I think those are really good, important things to think about. Like, I think the other thing about these roles is that they're so varied. And I've heard from people who are looking for these roles, like they're very worried that they don't have experience in like one little area or sometimes one big area. But what I want to say to them is like, none of us really do. Like, none of us can be experts in every single thing that we're doing. I hadn't done a lot of issues or crisis management before I came into this role, but I was lucky to like hire the resources that I needed to have a really great staff members who were experts in that and to be able to, segment their skill set with what I am really good at. I had never managed trademark and licensing before. So really learning that whole world, like there's just, you can't let perfection be the enemy of good.
Ooh, I love that. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a deep dive into the essence of what it means to lead. And we look forward to having you join us next time. Until then, keep learning and leading.
This Pulse Check mini-series has been brought to you by Pathify. Gone are the days of clunky interfaces, disjointed systems, and massive, unhelpful link farms. Centralize all your systems with Pathify so that students see the information that matters to them in a digital experience that actually makes sense. From prospective students through alumni, it's about time the student experience started looking and acting like a consumer app from this century. Visit pathify.com for more. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.